I see you've got your friend.
I've got my beast here. Yes. Oh, there she is. Okay, so she actually does get a treat, don't you, girl? Everyone, hello. My name is. Sorry. She's an active dog. My name is Tanisha Comers. I am a certified financial planner and the founder and president of KFLA, Canada's first financial literacy agency. And as I've already introduced you to, I've got Laura Bechard here and Cersei the dog, and we are going to be talking about change management for businesses through COVID. She has a company that she's been running for 13 years, which is Provision Business Advisors. And she has a number of different qualifications that you're going to need to explain to me, Laura, because you are, number one, a chartered professional accountant, an MBA, a master's in education, a ProSci change management, or PROSCI, ProSci, change management certified, and a value builder advisor. So please tell me, what do these things mean?
I think most people know what a chartered professional accountant is. ProSci is one of the leaders in change management. So the change, just about everything that we go through in our life is a change, and how we manage those changes. We either get the benefit of the change or we don't. And the Value Builder is an international program that I use with my clients when we're looking at building value in businesses. And sort of through the pandemic, what we did see is that some of the businesses weren't durable because they didn't have some of these key factors incorporated into their business. This system is really about building that durability and that value in businesses.
Laura told me that part of the way that she stayed relaxed through COVID and that she enjoys herself is by hanging out with her dogs, usually outside. But I couldn't do the both. So here she is. You got us started there already. Your education has to do with change management. So that was the biggest reason that I wanted to bring you on here, is that all the business owners that I've been working with and all the businesses I know are like, oh my God, there's what do we do? There's 6 million things to think about. How do we plan for this? Because I know most business owners have a business plan, whether it's loose or concrete or 16 pages or a napkin, and nobody planned for a pandemic. So how do we survive, Laura?
Great question. And that comment about nobody planned for a pandemic is absolutely true. One of the activities that I do with my clients is we walk through sort of a risk matrix and say, look, what's the probability of things happening, and what's the impact on my business if they happen? And if I had done this exercise with clients a year ago, none of them would have put a pandemic on the risk matrix, right?
I would not have included a pandemic.
None of us would have included a pandemic on our risk matrix.
Yeah.
So it was a very low probability event. And but it's a really important lesson for all of us.
When we're talking about, taking care of how to handle random events in the future, is really just to be aware that random events will occur, and when and if that happens, really, because it's a when, where do you source money from, or how do you pivot, or what sort of breather do you have in order to take your next steps? Because you're right, there's no way that you can plan for every single one of them, but to be somewhat prepared in the event of a wrench. Maybe we should call this, the wrench planning. All of a sudden something out of nowhere comes in.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's one of the things that I learned being married to a farmer. So my husband and I own a grain farm in Saskatchewan. And, every year, Mother Nature throws something at us. We don't know if it's going to be snow in October. We don't know if it's going to be too much rain, not enough rain. So we plan, and we can mitigate some of those risks with insurance. But some of the other risks we need to mitigate with our business practices. And so it's the same with other businesses, that we need to be not putting all of our eggs in one basket, not resourcing ourselves to the max, so that we do have a reserve, we do have some resources that we can call upon when the wrench happens.
And you mentioned a few things when we were chatting last time for businesses that I hadn't really thought about, that I really wanted to get into. You were talking about, let's start with logistics, because you said that is one of the ways that you can be better prepared or survive the pandemic. Let's talk about it. Logistics being, is that for example, me not being at the office anymore in order to not risk the clean for the clients? Is that a logistics question?
It could be a logistic question. What I'm finding is that people are thinking more geography around logistics. So people that were Calgary based or Alberta based are now opening up their minds and to say, gee, I could actually serve clients across Canada because everyone is doing this virtually. And if I just want to get up early, I can be serving clients in Eastern Canada just as easily as those in Calgary, because we are within one nation. And gee, there's no reason, my business is digital in Calgary. It can be digital in Toronto just as easily as it's digital here. So people are, I think, getting a little more courageous and braver about expanding their reach from just thinking about Calgary to thinking national and international.
You also mentioned, I think if I recall, logistics in terms of how, like I have a client who is saying that they're already moving and like they're moving into a smaller space because the staff who they can trust are not going to be at the office anymore, or they're going to have partial like in office versus work from home. And that I think is a significant difference that would not have come about without COVID. So that's a logistics thing, hey?
Yeah.
You were also talking about combining efforts. So what does that mean?
Entrepreneurs are really great at being solopreneurs and being independent, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm not going to have anybody tell me what to do. But when the pandemic hit, they also didn't have anybody to leverage. They had no one to help them. And so, I'm seeing more collaborative efforts. I'm seeing some getting to the point where they're actually merging and they're saying, let's be in business together because your skill set complements mine. And being a solopreneur has been kind of lonely for the past 5 months.
Yeah.
And together we're always stronger. You do have that benefit of that collaborative partnership. And whether it goes to the full extreme of being a merger, or it just is a strategic alliance, or we're collaborating on an initiative.
Given that conditions are a bit tougher, and that, it's harder to reach people, being able to leverage off of other people's expertise and or their networks. It's a really good point. Again, as you're saying, formal or not. So there was a number of other things you mentioned, creative financing and efficiency. Let's talk about that, especially creative financing. Everyone's like, okay, what is that? Like, how am I like sourcing a loan shark?
So sometimes you can access resources by bartering.
Yeah.
So you can trade. You can sometimes access those resources by leveraging your suppliers, because your suppliers may have programs. You may be able to negotiate different terms. You might even rent things rather than buying them. So, the Ruckify situation, right? You got all these extra assets lying around. Let's rent them out so that we're bringing a little more cash flow in to our business, because, some of us have gone on a buying spree in Alberta. There's been some pretty good years, and we have all kinds of toys lying around.
I'm hearing two things from a creative financing standpoint that I think are the most important. Number one, kind of like basics, is reduce your costs and your expenses. Is, as you're saying, go negotiate, see what you can cut out, what do you not need from a logistics perspective, and then on the other side, you're saying, what can you earn? Like, so, like, can you use assets that you already have for incomes that you don't already make? So, like, can you perhaps rent out or sell the furniture? Can you perhaps rent out the additional office space? Those are really good ideas. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, whenever, like, the one of the big principles of finance is making sure you're getting a return on the investment. So if you've got assets that you've invested in and you're not getting any return on those, they're sunk cost, and they're actually negatively impacting the health of your business, because you've got, whether those assets are equipment or furniture or computers or empty space in a facility, those are assets you're paying for, and you're not generating any return on them.
So you have a couple dogs, right?
Yeah, well, we have one, and then our two of our children have dogs, and then we have living with us right now that has a dog. So there's always dogs around.
I think efficiency kind of speaks for itself, like make sure that you're streamlining, that you're not wasting time, that you're not wasting money, which kind of goes through combing through those expenses and possible revenue streams, right? It's all sort of tied in there, in my opinion. But you mentioned also focusing on a niche. I think that's important too. So what does that mean?
It's one of the hardest concepts for many entrepreneurs to get their heads around, is that really going, when we choose to launch a business, we can go a mile wide and an inch deep, or we can become experts and go a mile deep and an inch wide. And so often to actually get better at our cash flows, we have to serve more of one type of client rather than trying to serve a few of many different kinds of clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that translates back into efficiencies. That if we've got a marketing budget and we have to spread it to hit 17 different target markets, those target markets all need different messaging, and they all need sometimes they need different channels, and our resources get diluted because we don't have usually the marketing budget to hit all of those different markets. Mm-hmm. So we take a generalist approach, and we put an ad out to sort of to track anybody. Well, if your ad is so general, it doesn't hit anyone. And so you actually are not getting a return on your marketing investment. And then, of course, you often go blame your marketing people because you're not getting the return on the investment. But where the real problem is that you haven't defined your target market in a way that you're niching. So when you're niching, you actually become the experts on that for that particular market, and you get more. And so all of your languaging and your social presence, your digital presence, your brochures, your pamphlets, everything specializes towards a certain niche market, just like you've done, Tanisha.
Several years ago, I had managed to attain a point in which my practice was basically referral only. I was very excited. There were so many referrals coming in, but my closing ratio was nowhere near what I wanted it to be. Well, I did some work with a specific referral coach, like really narrow down who my clients are. So, you're talking about your niche. I got 4 people I'm looking for. I know exactly who those 4 people look like. I know when somebody fits those molds, and I know what my message is for each one of those 4 people. And it's slightly different, but it's all kind of geared to those. And since then, I kid you not, the referrals that come in are perfect referrals almost every time. Like my closing ratio has skyrocketed.
One of my clients, we've had a lot of fun with those avatars, and they've all got names. And when we're talking, we just talk about, well, what would Becky think? And we know exactly who we're talking about because Becky's one of her customer avatars.
That's a great idea. Okay, so re-engagement and trust was another one. Okay, so this one surprised me because I hadn't thought about it. So what do you mean by re-engagement and trust being part of the way to survive the pandemic?
Many entrepreneurs are thinking that as soon as they reopen the doors, the customers will just come back. Mm-hmm. And I think to some degree they will, but to some degree they won't. And I think if you've heard about the bell curve, it's sort of like there's people on the spectrum, right? And we've got people who are early adopters, and as soon as the doors open, they're in. They're the ones getting their hair cut. They want that the salon's open. They're in there. Right. And we have other people at the very other end of the spectrum who are what we call the laggards, and they're waiting until they are sure it's perfectly safe before they're going to go in and get their hair cut. When we're thinking about our messaging with our clients, we have to not only tell them, hey, we're open again, come back in, we're ready, we miss you, we're ready to greet you again, but we also have to help our customers understand that they can safely come in and do business with us, and that as employers, we're making sure that our supplies coming into our business are safe. So what are we doing to safeguard our inventory or the supplies or the hair products if we're talking about the salon? How are we keeping our employees safe? How are our employees keeping our customers safe? And really build that trust and that confidence, because we sit here and listen to the rules, and we can go on a website and read the rules, but if I don't trust that the business is following the rules, I'm still not necessarily going to want to give them my business.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to touch on really briefly what to do if you can't survive the pandemic. So you were talking a little bit about, just for a minute, structured wind down or an orderly wind down. Please explain.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that just decide they're going to close the doors. So in our world, we call that orderly liquidation. Okay. So you're not being forced into bankruptcy by a creditor, whether that's a bank or a supplier, because you can't pay your bills, but you are just choosing to wind your business down. And so when we do that in an orderly fashion, we're not a distress sale. We're not a fire sale. We don't have all the emotions that are maybe encouraging us to make a bad decision. And our brains are continuing to think. As soon as we get, our emotional state takes over, our thinking part of our brain takes a holiday.
Turns off. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so
that's actually exactly why financial planners are important during some of the more emotional transitions, like
Yeah.
life transitions, diagnoses, job loss, yada yada, is that disconnect sort of between your emotions and your logical decision making. But
Yeah,
okay, so I love.
that's what you often where I fit with the client too, because I'm not as emotionally invested in the situation.
You're the third party, you're like, you're unbiased, you're unopinionated, you're unemotional about it, because not everybody wants to fight through this. Like, I've had a couple clients who, they've been in business for 30 years, they've run their restaurant, they're done. They do not
Yeah,
want
baby boomers are there, right? So some
to.
baby boomers have said, I've been through how many ups and downs. I don't want to live this one out. You know, and so they may think about orderly liquidation, but they may also think about some potential buyers of their business that they maybe hadn't thought about.
So let's talk about buyers, because recurring revenue is one of the ways that we can build up that value. As you're saying, it's durable. You have a baseline revenue that you know is going to come in, which is important. So do you have ideas for how to do this? Are there other things that we should be watching for? What advice do you have for us, Laura?
Yeah, so some businesses run on a transactional model that they have to
Yeah.
kind of catch that client every month. So every month they
Yeah.
start at zero. We can't rely. They don't know what revenue is going to come in. They don't know what sales is going to be. So they're not sure what they can invest because they really aren't sure what revenue is coming in. When we move to a recurring revenue model, we now have dependable cash flows coming in. So when we have that dependability, where that reduces our risk and that reduces our stress, and we're able to now plan for how we're going to invest those.
This one is Cersei, and she is going to do her best to extract treats from this toy while we talk. While we have time, because we're going to run out here, is how do we reduce business risk? Because that's another part of building a valuable business and building a durable business, which seems to be the theme of today's conversation. So you mentioned customer concentration, team risk, hiring versus recruiting, and documentation. So tell me what those.
Yeah, one of the areas that we look at is the area of really that where's that risk is with people outside of the owner of the company. So we're going to have risk with customers, we have risk with team members, and we have risk with suppliers. So if any
Right.
one of those if we've got too many eggs in one basket, that creates some risk. So if we've got a really big client, for example, that generates a lot of our revenue, if we lose that one client, that really puts a lot of risk in our cash flows. So if we get that whale of a client, we want to actually get a team together to service that client so we can go find another whale so that we're not dependent on that one key client for our livelihood of our business. So that same concept happens with a team member. If you've got key employees that you are dependent on and they give you 2 weeks notice, now what? You're hooped, right? So we always recommend that clients are always recruiting, that they're always looking for team members so that if something does happen and your team member gives you the 2 weeks notice or they win the lottery, you've got people already in the pipeline, and it's a lot faster for you to now pull somebody in because you actually have some candidates that you've just been waiting to bring them into the business.
Man, you talking about recruiting versus hiring. I have definitely my entire life only hired when I need the job to be filled rather than having that pipeline full of people who might eventually want to join the team, even if it's not today, or might be appropriate for the team in a bit. But you also mentioned the hub and spoke, which I thought was really important because I've seen this with a lot of businesses. And I mean, I'm super guilty of this in my business as well, where, you are the business.
Yeah, and that's your typical self-employed person. You are the business. And so if the clients are coming to you for everything, the team is coming to you for everything, suppliers are coming to you for everything, the buck stops with you thinking about, gee, how do I start exiting? You need to start documenting all those operating processes, your business processes, so that if you hire someone, even if you don't want to sell your company, you want to hire someone to walk into a general manager role or an operations manager role, you've actually got everything ready to train them. And people often hate that word documentation, especially entrepreneurs, because that isn't generally their strong suits is documenting.
Takes miles ahead.
And so I just say capture it.
I think that all of those principles that you were talking about not being the hub, about having your like knowing what the business is and having it documented, easy to hand out, having a secure team, like that's something that's good for all businesses at any time. And to have that in place and then to be able to say, you know, I've done this now, maybe 10 years, maybe you're not selling your business for 10 years, but now you have that in place. Now you've got that structure. The business is easier to run and it's easier to sell.
Yeah, when you're ready to exit, because again, the Grim Reaper will come, and there will be a day where you need to
Yeah.
exit your business, and you want to leave the business in the best possible state for the next owner of the business, so that they're able to take it, and your legacy will continue. Because that that's often something that's missed when you're thinking about your will is might have an executor name, but if the executor actually had to step in to and run your business, if something happened to you, are they actually capable of doing it? And so we sort of talk about what's your emergency succession plan, because if that happened, you do need somebody that knows the passwords, knows where the keys are, knows how to keep the business going until you do have a more permanent successor in place.
That is a really good point. I'm going to have to think about that and add that to my risk management list of things to do. You have somebody who will take over your business if you're in the hospital? Absolutely. I had a lot of fun. I hope that you had fun with Cersei too.
I did. He looks like he's a wonderful, wonderful dog. I mean, ours was sort of a rescue, and
Yeah.
she's still pretty high strung. So,
Yeah.
she is getting better, but she's definitely still a work in progress.
Yeah, her too. But I don't mind a work in progress, like they're still great dogs and like, yeah. So what if they've got a couple quirks?
Yeah, they put up with ours, so we should.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.